Greetings, all. Hope you're enjoying the day. That on one side of the island is this, and another side of the island is that. And it rained pretty much all of last night. Normally the sun is warm this time in the morning. It's still warm, but cool breeze because of the dark clouds filtering out the sun's energy there. But still beautiful. Also hope that you're observing the sorry for the interruption here, but we'll continue our journey. As I was saying, I hope you are also observing events that are happening around the world. One, this I don't know what to call this one in Africa, because from what I'm hearing, people say they arrested the president and the leaders of both opposition parties. So I don't know yet. I heard people say that is the result of corruption and drug dealing going on in the country. That is possible because quite a few people are waiting for the bus and no bus. That's possible because one of the biggest, I never dealt with this thing before in my videos, but most of today's billionaires, and when I say today's billionaires, I'm not talking about Bill Gates and people who own companies like that. The leadership that we see is the face of those companies. But the people who, they call it old money. Old money come from trafficking, drugs, and human trafficking, slavery. That's what the money you see in the world today. People talk about the Rothschilds and all the other old rich people. That money came from starting wars. In the case of the Rothschilds, and drugs and slavery. So what you're seeing today is the same process. What they call in AI and robotics is a bit to create a slave. Capitalism cannot function in its current iteration without slavery. Uh-oh. Rain. Bus and the bridge down. Capitalism in its current form cannot exist without slavery. I like to walk while I'm talking, but seems like the rain is intent on changing things a little. And what we are having is a change in the world, not just the ownership of things, but who benefits. This current iteration of capitalism is a small cadre of people, about less than 0.05%, half of 1%, who really benefits from it. And if you take away the families, right, the relatives, say like you take away, you leave King Charles and his wife, you keep him and leave the rest, and then you take the head of the other families and leave out the rest, then it goes down rapidly. I mean, it's almost 1,000th, 0.1,000th, you know what I'm saying, of 1%, who owns almost everything on the planet. The Bill Gates and Warren Buffett work for them. They give them the money and the power to make decisions. But if one of them make a decision that does not follow the rules, the laws that are set out, you hear people talking about the world order. That's what I'm talking about. That world order, current as it is being shaken up. You got the capitalism that is changing. And what the Chinese have done is pull all of their wealthy people in and say, hey, look. I understand you built the companies, but what you're seeing in America's system and the European system is that failure that later on is going to come back to haunt China. And it will destroy China just like how it's destroying the Europeans. And we are not going to allow that. We saw China for almost 200 years that functioned as a slave state. You had the slave triangle and you had the drug triangle. The slave triangle operated to the Caribbean, South America, Africa. There were several of those triangles actually. It was not just one part of Africa. Because you gotta remember, Africa goes from the South Pole all the way up to Asia. Nah, no, I don't deal with this foolishness calling we're Caucasian people Europe. That's one landmass. Rivers don't count as making consonants. Anyway, you had a triangle between Europe, India, and China, or Asia. And the Japanese joined the Europeans against the Chinese now. Because the Japanese were first to be forced to trade with the West. The Chinese at first voluntarily traded with the West. But after they saw that they were getting a short end of the stick like the Africans, they decided, you know what? We're not trading. We want payment, and our payment must be in silver. And when the silver coffers from Europe began to go empty, the Europeans came up with a plan. Bring in drugs into China. So you got the Indians complicit, the Europeans are complicit, and the Japanese are complicit. Guess where you see the divisions in the planet today? Right. Along those same lines where you see the Chinese changing the way things are done, along with the Russians. And if you look at Russian history, you'll see that the Western Asians, the people we call Caucasians, I don't want to use that word, the people we call Caucasians, the word con. Anyway, and I'm not going to, what do you call that now? I'm not going to patent that word. Anyway, the Caucasians tried taking over Russia a long time ago. Long time ago. This is not the first time that they tried to take over Russia. Because Russia, now, if they had taken over Russia, they would have just used the resources from Russia and kept Africa in the dark. Africa would have never developed. That's what we call development. They'll be able to sell some of their food. They would have turned Africa into what Joseph Borrell called the garden. Their garden. With the help of African leaders, because the African leaders are the ones who kept Africa for the 60 years that they were supposed to be independent from developing. These same tribal foolishness that the Europeans came and found it with, they kept on pushing, even though a lot of them were educated in the so-called West and saw how they can pull their own people out of poverty. They saw that the US fought a war against King George. The wealthy people in the US during the Revolutionary War fought so they can have self-determination. Their weapons were not as good as the British. Right? And when the people started fighting, the soldiers couldn't fight the British on using the tactics that the British were fighting with. But gradually they learned. And one of the people who helped the Americans defeat the British, even though they were black people who fighting for the British, was a black man. He encouraged Washington to fight the British, attack the British across the river in Jersey. I'm not saying that the Caucasians didn't fight. That's not what I'm saying. But this black man encouraged Washington to expand his thinking. Instead of fighting, moving from one side of New York area to the other side, fighting the British, he said, look, you got to take out one of the strongest arms that the British have on the other side of the water. And the Hessians were one of Europe's best armies. When I say the Hessians, the Germans now. The state of Hesse in Germany, H-E-S-S. Like the oil company? Oh. H-E-S-S? Right. That state had one of the best armies on the planet. And here's this black man talking Washington into taking on the Hessian. And guess what? The surprise attack against the Hessians defeated them. They surrendered. And Washington went on and forced the British to sign a treaty giving the rich people in America the right to self-determination. You hear what I'm saying? Not independence. Self-determination. America celebrates independence today because they went on to take over the place that the British and the French and the Portuguese had on the planet. That self-determination allowed them to take possession. If you look at the history up to 1945, after the end of the war, America began to set the rules, everything. And here are these Africans still in their, what do you call it now? I don't know. It's like the neighbors got a dog, 2 dogs or 3 dogs or whatever. And you got dogs. The house across from you got a dog, the house across from you got a dog. Now another dog come in the neighborhood and defeat y'all dogs. You know why it defeat y'all dogs? Because your dog's not gonna move from. Alright. Your dog is not going to move from your step unless it's going to fight the neighbor's dog. The neighbor's dog is not going to move from his unless it's going to fight your dog. These are people whose education were in, you get this gasoline powered bus, and if you see an electric powered bus, the Chinese bus going over that hill, it can actually push that bus up the hill. But anyway, that's why you see the Chinese are taking over this thing. I paused there to let you know that. Anyway, that's the way tribalism is. When the Muslims came to Africa, they formed a cohesive unit in West Africa that helped them to overthrow the Europeans and rule Africa and Europe. They didn't just rule Europe, they ruled Africa. And it wasn't a big army from Saudi Arabia or UAE or any that ruled Africa for them. It was the Africans that rule Africa in their name. I hope you people are listening to what I'm saying. I have flirted around these things for all the time that I'm talking. And I'll give you a little information here and expect you to go see this for yourself. That's what I told myself. That you will listen to what I say and then go and look it up and say, hey, you're right or you're wrong. And I know when you go look at that, you see that a group of people came across the Sahara. And they brought with them the Muslim way of colonization. The Muslim crept slowly, they moved slowly down the east coast of Africa. Not quite to Zimbabwe. And then they moved across. All right. They moved across North Africa. Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Sudan, all of them fell to not the Muslim army, but the religion, the belief. The Muslim armies now took over Syria and the coast of North Africa, not going into the jungles of West Africa or Southern Africa. No Congo, no Angola, what we call Angola today, none of that. They didn't go. The African now, mostly my people who were converted, who were what we call Egyptian and Ethiopian, Yemenis. You must call our people today, they want to call themselves Jews. They were sons of Abraham. And I'm not going to argue with that. And I'll tell you about that later. But Muslims didn't, West Africa and Western Europe, Western Asia, what we call Europe, the Africans, the Muslims were fighting against the Europeans when they got to Turkey. They were fighting against the West Asians, finding it hard to conquer them. Khan came in after them, took over the whole area pretty easily. I mean, that tell you how anyway. Uh, Now you got Africans in the army of the Muslims, in the army of Saudi Arabia, in the army of Iran, Iraq, and these Africans are conquering Asia, and the last conquering nations to be conquered were Europe. That's not the history that you will read when the Muslims write it, because they look at everybody that they converted as being on paper Muslim. They didn't say the Africans did this, because when they say Muslims, everybody's going to look at as Arabian or Iraqi or Iranian. I'm using the word Iranian, the European thing, purpose, because the Persian, as you see today, is the one fighting against the same people. The Arabs, still to this day, don't think the Iranians should be as strong as them. If you hear some of the names that they call the people, the Muslims from Iran, you wouldn't believe that these are the same people, or they preach Iran. I mean, that Muslims, they're teaching that Muslims don't discriminate. I've heard the names, and I've heard Africans themselves use the names. I mean, in Little Ghana, I heard people call them dogs. So they're a significant, you know. Anyway, Africans, they had joined somebody else. It's not the first, the Europeans are not the first. They joined the Muslim to take over Western Asia. Now, the African has always been the enemy of the European. What do you call the European today? Always been. Africans will move into Asia, take it over, and then get sloppy, and the Asians will fight against them and push them back to Africa. But the Asians never went into Africa in mass, like how the Africans went into Asia. Until 1492. And it wasn't actually 1492, but it's quite a bit after. A little bit after. So we got this 600 year, 22, almost 800 year freedom that the Europeans had from Africans. And these people, even though they learned the same thing that they know and had the same knowledge that the Americans had to use to get the British off their neck, but never will accept self-determination. World War II, the Americans negotiated with the Arabs to give them some semblance of, you give us your oil, your land will remain. The British is not going to come back. That's what they deal with. The British is not going to come back into your land, take it over, run things. The oil belongs to you. These African leaders, their pride will destroy Africa. 800 years. They're still fighting each other. But in the next video, I'm going to bring that Africa into today. Expand on it and show you what's about to happen. It's already started. Peace. Have a great day wherever you are.